Last week we're talking about security as we're looking at what happened with Afghanistan, etc. Talking about what the impacts are going to be and suggesting that multi-factor authentication was something we need to consider. What I didn't say yet last week was about doing a risk analysis. It's a big issue that is really overlooked in many small businesses, and at the opposite end of the scale in a lot of bureaucracies it gets way too much attention. And in my opinion, actually they go through a risk identification process and then try and eliminate all of the risks they find without actually doing the analysis component of it to find how to manage the risk. So we want to get that middle ground so that your business is properly protected, but you're not overly burdened with lots of cumbersome details. Because make no mistake, I recommend multi-factor authentication, but it's a pain to go through because you have that second thing that you need to do every time you log in. You not only have to enter your password, but you have to get a code from somewhere or enter a code in or something else like that. So it is extra work, it is cumbersome, there are problems with getting people to actually do that sort of thing, so we need to have a good reason for them to do it, and that is where risk analysis comes into play. Now, I'm sure everybody here has heard the term risk analysis. It's something that you can't avoid. Most people understand that we set up a matrix and we look at the likelihood of something happening on one axis, and on the other axis the impact, whatever that might happen to be, and those things which are highly likely to happen, have high impacts, they're the ones that we focus on the most. We also like to actually put in a third dimension, which is the likelihood of detection, because sometimes things will happen which are genuine risks, but you don't find out about them until too late. Something which is really easy to understand: if somebody has an accident, there could be the risk of internal injury, but you do not know whether that internal injury has happened straight away, and it could be some time later that is discovered. So that's the likelihood of detection that we put into that. So I'd suggest that you cover those three things and make your own analysis on there, and then based on that make an informed decision on whether or not we need to put additional security on there. Because quite frankly, if you've got a whole group of photos from your company organisation, which is to do with the social outings, the company picnic, all of those sorts of events, it doesn't really matter if they get hacked a great deal, except for somebody's ego. Is highly unlikely to cause major issues to the ongoing functioning of the company. It may have other ramifications for the people involved, but probably not for the company itself. But once you've identified these risks and you've worked out that they really will have an ongoing impact for the company, if you lose your financial records, for example, that's one thing you want to guard. If you lose personal information of customers which is being hacked, you need to protect against that. That is just too serious to not worry about. Now, I want to introduce three other things which need to be taken into account that just seem to be completely ignored, and that's the impact on the whole. We've been talking about the impact of one particular identified risk, but these things do not exist in isolation. You do not work just doing one job. You have a range of jobs that you need to do to keep your staff happy, to keep your clients happy, and everybody else happy. So if you've identified a risk, look also for predecessors. What needs to happen before you get to that activity, and by putting this extra security on there, is that going to have an impact leading up to it? If we talk about the predecessors, then we look about the dependents or successors. Again, what else happens after you've been through this particular activity, and what is the impact of adjusting the risk status of that activity to things which follow on. And we talked about before and after. Look about sideways. So are there any codependence, anything which also happens at the same time or that feeds into it, which is not before or after, but is also impacted by it? So they're the things that we need to consider. The likelihood of it happening, the impact of it happening, the likelihood of detection, the impact on the predecessor activities, on the dependent activities, and on any codependent activities which happen with it. And once you've had a look at that, then what is a way to mitigate that risk, and how do we manage that risk? Now, once you've been through there and identified them, the next stage is the analysis and working out how you are going to mitigate those risks. You do not have to cut out every single risk. I'm thinking back to Y2K when we're going through and managing all of those risks. There were some of them which were really significant. I know there was a water treatment dam, in our local government area that would have dumped 12 months worth of chemicals, into the system had we not sorted out the Y2K issues. Equally, for cars, some of the cars were classed as not Y2K compliant. But the mitigation ended up being to do nothing, because where they were not compliant was on the clock on the dash. And if somebody just happened to push the button on the clock to show the date and the month, which people very rarely did, it would show the wrong year. So we didn't worry about that. It was not worth doing anything about. So sometimes the right mitigation is to do nothing. Sometimes the right mitigation is to prevent things from happening at all. Other times it's best to do is to wait and see type of environment and have something in place for when this risk actually eventuates. But you will know that because you know your business and you know the impacts on your business, so you will know the best way to go. So I still strongly urge you to get multi-factor authentication working within your environment, but don't rush out and put it everywhere. Work out where it's going to make a genuine difference and then go ahead. Daryl from Darbeth, see you next week.